Hello my fellow oddities and welcome to a new video. Mortal Kombat has had 3 different main timelines across 30 years of games. The original timeline spanning from Mortal Kombat 1992 to Mortal Kombat Armageddon, the rebooted timeline spanning from MK9 to MK11, and the New Era timeline, which is currently ongoing with Mortal Kombat 1. Today, I wanted to look at the 3 different timelines and discuss which 5 characters were done the best in each one. I'll be looking at the impact this version of the character had on their overall perception, as well as the timeline overall, as well as how engaging and developed their story was. I will try not to factor in any personal biases, or else Bihan would just be number 1 in every single list, but I'm mostly trying to keep this as objective as possible. Who was the best, not who was my favorite. But without further ado, let's take a look at the original timeline. This one is obviously the longest, so it has that big advantage of having the most time to develop the most amount of characters with each and every game, but it also has a big disadvantage in not having any of those cinematic story modes. Yes, there is Deception and Armageddon's Conquest modes, but those still don't scratch the surface that the full cinematic story modes of Mortal Kombat 9 through Mortal Kombat 1 go into. Before we get into the top 5, some honorable mentions. Firstly, Raiden. Raiden is really great in the original timeline and just barely didn't make it because I think he's a bit too passive in too many games, both in terms of story and personality. Shang Tsung is also great, being the main villain of the first game and part of the Deadly Alliance. Cyrax is at his best. Kenshi had a really good run for the time he had, and I also kind of have to give a shout out to Shujinko and Taven for being the main protagonist of the Conquest modes, even though I don't really like them that much personally. But getting into the official top 5, at number 5 I have Ermac. Might be a surprise. Everyone thinks that before Mortal Kombat 1, Ermac was always just a jobber, but no, in Deception mainly, Ermac was actually one of the good guys. Sort of-ish. He helped the good guys, but he was probably more like an anti-hero. And the reason I have Ermac rated so highly is because of how much of a contrast he is to the other versions of the character. This version of Ermac is so much better than the rebooted timeline version of him, and even the New Era version, and it makes you go back and really appreciate what they did with him here. Yes, he did start out as just a lackey creation of Shao Kahn, but for him to be able to be freed and overcome that and become a more complex, more human-ish character is a really intriguing storyline that was sort of attempted in Mortal Kombat 1, but a lot more boring since it was just one soul taking over and being the good guy, whereas in Deception, the souls of Ermac learn to sync together as one being. Am I overrating him just a bit to have him over characters like Raiden, Sindel, and even like Kitana? Yes, maybe, but those characters haven't been as badly butchered as Ermac has since then, so I just value this version of him a lot more. At number 4, I have my boy Bihan. Firstly, huge boost in points if you have your own canon game, especially one that is so story heavy. Bihan's dynamic of being established as a heartless assassin at the beginning of the game, willing to work for Quan Chi without question, and then changing his ways a bit, sparing Serena, fighting for the greater good, not wanting to have a dark soul, and potentially going down a path of redemption, it's so good and it's all in this game, Sub-Zero Mythologies. But that's not it. You have the first game in 1992 where he is initially killed and then gets brought back later on in the series as Noob Saibot, with a great dynamic with his brother in Deception and Armageddon. Even though we don't get much of him, original timeline Noob is easily the best version of him, and actually feels like somewhat of a threat. I really love how the story leaves off too, with Kwai attempting to save him after his attack on the Lin Kuei, but obviously we know from the Battle of Armageddon that he does not. Sometimes the tragic endings are the best ones. But yeah, Bihan easily has to be in the top 5 just for mythologies alone. But at number 3, you might be surprised that he's not higher, I have the main character, Liu Kang. Hold on now, don't get upset, I've got my reasoning, and I think it's understandable. Liu Kang was the main character and most prominent in the games with the least in-depth story. Mortal Kombat 1, Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, and Mortal Kombat 4. As soon as the narrative leveled up with the 3D era, he died, so it's hard to get a sense of what Liu's actual arc and storyline is compared to the other characters, because we almost never see him interact with anyone else, or fight through adversity, or just do awesome, cool things. There are the MK4 cutscenes, but and there is his spirit/zombie form in Deception and Armageddon, but those don't really feel like the same Liu Kang, and he's certainly not the most prominent figure. But with all that said, he was still the main character for 4 games in a row. He defeated Goro, he defeated Shang Tsung, he defeated Shao Kahn, he defeated Shinnok, he beat everyone in his path until the Deadly Alliance, so you have to hold him in high esteem for that, but I just wish we got more of his personality. But now we have number 2, and this was a really hard pick between number 1 and number 2. But I have to go with Hanzo Hasashi / Scorpion in the runner-up spot. The thing that let him down for me compared to number 1 was his lack of consistency. There are some games where his story is fantastic. Mortal Kombat 1992, Mortal Kombat 4, Deception, Armageddon, but then there are games where he does pretty much nothing in the story or is just a letdown, such as Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, and Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. But those games where he's good, boy is he good. Just the first game alone, that setup of being a spirit of vengeance with one mission of revenge and eventually getting it, that's enough to place him on here alone. But then it evolves, and that mission of revenge continues and continues, until you realize it'll just never end. Through highs and lows, Scorpion stopping at nothing for a closure that was just never meant to be. Me personally, I like that better than the story where he's restored to life, brings back the Shirai Ryu. That's just a tad bit more basic and predictable to me. But he has some of the best antagonistic relationships with Bi-Han, Kuai Liang, Quan Chi, the Elder Gods. He pretty much has no friends, and I love that about him. And it feels like he always has a different type of rage with each person he gets revenge on. Like with Bi-Han, it's more like a hawk staring down its prey. With Kuai, it's more like disappointment. With Quan Chi, it's just all-out rage. And with the Elder Gods, it's just being fed up. I don't know, maybe this is something I'm making up in my head though. But at number 1, the character who I think was just the most consistently great throughout the timeline is Kuai Liang Sub-Zero. Basically from MK2 onwards, it's just up and up. In MK2, he's kind of just there to be the Sub-Zero for the game. MK3, he has the cyber storyline. MK4, he has the dynamic with Scorpion and remembering what his brother told him about Shinnok. Deadly Alliance has Frost. Deception has Noob Saibot. Armageddon has Noob Saibot again. And it just gets better and better. Not because of Noob Saibots. Or maybe it is, I don't know. I do wish there was a bit more inner conflict with him compared to characters like Scorpion and Bi-Han. Kuai is just a bit more straightforward in that regard, but overall he has the best and most diverse relationships and dynamics in the franchise. The most intriguing storyline in the way it goes from completing his brother's mission to the cyber initiative to training and apprehending Frost to fighting his brother and then trying to free his brother. It's just such a smooth yet diverse road for the character. It works great. But yeah, that does it for the original and best timeline. It's all downhill from here. In all seriousness, I think besides Ermac being on there and Liu Kang maybe being a bit low, I don't think my list will be too controversial. Let's see if that changes with the rebooted timeline. This is the one created by Raiden after Armageddon, sending a message back in time to his MK 1992 self in order to prevent Armageddon. And despite this having less games, I actually think it has way more to work with than the original timeline, because it has 4 separate full cinematic story modes with 9, X, 11, and 11 Aftermath. However, overall in quality, I think they played it a bit safe with this timeline, and the risks they did take usually weren't the best ones, so it's a bit harder to find which characters really stand out as the best compared to the original timeline where the standouts were just so great that they were just that impactful on the character overall. Some honorable mentions: Kuai Liang is much worse in this timeline than in the previous one, but still a decent character. Raiden is also very prominent throughout the 3 games, but his characterization isn't my favorite and can also be kinda inconsistent. And Sonya Blade is pretty okay. I don't really have any specific things to note about her. I just felt like she should be included. I don't know. She's pretty important. But beginning with number 5, I have Kitana. Now this placement is almost entirely carried by MK11. In MK9, she's decent. I like her moments with Liu Kang. Her voice and emotion she shows are really good. But other than that, she doesn't really do much and is kind of hard to take seriously with her costume. MKX, she does absolutely nothing, but MK11 is really when she comes into her own. It's the perfect mix of fierce warrior who can compete with the likes of Shao Kahn, but also a princess, royalty who can negotiate and solve problems with her voice and her mind, rather than her fists, or fans, I guess. And this is kind of Kitana's quintessential character moment that I feel has gotten a lot of fans to rally around her as truly one of the best characters and the face of female MK. So I have her at the number 5 spot for her MK11 iteration. At number 4, I have Jax. Now, this one is another one that might be a bit questionable, but hear me out here. I really love how Jax is portrayed in these games. He's the one character whose story of being a revenant actually works for his character. And it's pretty fitting for being a soldier and what being forced to fight for the enemy team, aiding and killing your friends against your will would do to a person. They don't shove the PTSD angle down your throat or anything, but it's clearly what's behind his character in MKX and MK11. I like Jax being sort of this damaged person who's almost disassociated with who he is, with fighting in wars, having new arms to adjust to, literally not being in control of himself for years, and that leading him to almost becoming who he really isn't in MK11 when he works for Kronika. And then contrasting that with the younger Jax in MK11 who hasn't been through all of that hardship, you can't deny it's good stuff, especially when I put it like that and say it that way, because I don't know if they actually intended that or if I'm just headcanoning right now. What can I say? I think this version of him is underrated, especially if you compare him to the previous timeline where the most notable thing about him is that he's in a rivalry with Su Hao. Number 3, another one almost entirely carried by MK11. Geez, not expecting that to be the game of all of them to have the best characters here, but I got Shang Tsung. Now, Shang Tsung was already pretty good in MK9. He did what he had to do, be the host of Mortal Kombat, lose to Liu Kang, restore your youth, fight in the second tournament, die. That part wasn't in the original script, but a rebooted timeline. And then the man just wasn't in MKX at all, and it seemed like he wouldn't be in MK11, but then we got that trailer for the crypt where he was revealed and he was played by the legendary Cary Tagawa from the Mortal Kombat 1995 movie, and we all lost our mind. And then he was revealed to be DLC, and at the time I was happy but also a bit bummed out because yes, we would see Cary Tagawa in intro dialogues and stuff, but we weren't going to see him in a main storyline or anything. But then Aftermath happened, and yeah, he was just the perfect Shang Tsung. He just zero criticisms at all. Like, perfect. He was conniving, he was threatening, you never knew his next move, he made you laugh, he had you on edge, not in a weird way, or maybe it is, I don't know, whatever floats your boat. And he was the main villain of Aftermath, the final battle, and depending on the route you chose, the winner of the whole story. It can't get better than that for Shang Tsung. The only reason he's not higher is because it was just that one game. He wasn't in MKX at all, and in MK9 he was just decent, but not on the level of MK11. But that gets in the number 3 spot. But then we have a familiar face for number 2 in the same exact spot in the ranking that he was in the last list. We have Hanzo Hasashi / Scorpion. Now, I think he would be number 1 easily if the MKX comics were canon, but they are not. But even still, Scorpion has to be up there with one of the best of the rebooted timeline. He was one of the best characters in MK9. For one chapter. Then he became a jobber, but it was some really good stuff for that one chapter. Making that agreement with Raiden, then breaking that agreement out of rage, ultimately sacrificing his one chance to restore his clan as it was originally. And that shot of him slowly lifting up Bihan's charred skull and then shattering it on the ground. One of the best cinematic moments of any Mortal Kombat game. But Mortal Kombat X really brought his character to the next level, and we got the first appearance of just normal Hanzo Hasashi as a playable character and part of the story. And we finally got a true alliance and peace being made between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, which was really nice to see after so much time with them as constant rivals. And then him having his own protege in Takeda, learning to be a father figure once again. But then he learns of Quan Chi being responsible for his family's death, and we see in this game that Scorpion is not the Hell Spectre, Scorpion is Hanzo's vengeance, and he still exists even without all of the fire powers and the ninja costume and the white eyes and stuff, and we see that again with him killing Quan Chi with no regard for the consequences that would come of it. Then MK11 tied up his character nicely, with him being a mainstay of the Defenders of Earthrealm, and him convincing his younger self through what he had learned on his own journey that Kronika was the enemy and vengeance isn't the only thing that matters. And then he gets killed by Devora, which was lame, but NRS. But yeah, this Hanzo is great, and it's one of the few detours that NRS makes from the original timeline that I actually think works well. The original Scorpion never got his happy ending. This version does get the satisfying conclusion. Somewhat. He does die, but like, he dies in a way that's not like tragic or horrible. I mean, yeah, death is tragic, but like, you get what I mean. But the best character of this rebooted timeline, probably coming as no surprise to most, is Johnny Cage. Not only is his personality at its best and most fleshed out, with him usually stealing the show whenever he's on screen, but he's the character with the most clear arc and that always takes advantage of whatever the main theme of the game that he's in. MK9 Johnny, narratively, is the weakest of the three, but he's still a fun character with lots of memorable dialogue and moments.
And I'm taking you down, I'm taking you down, I'm taking you out, I'm taking you out, and I'm taking you out for dinner.
MKX is where Johnny and his family almost become the main characters. He is the first chapter of the game and the one to defeat Shinnok, with his green halo being one of the main aspects of the story and how it connects to family, the main theme of MKX. And then his interactions and relationships with Sonya, trying to convince her to be more there for her family and not drown herself in the special forces and work, and then him taking on Cassie with her mother not being there as much, and his expectations for her and how ultimately the love they have for each other is what wins them the day. And then MK11 has the younger and older Johnny interacting, which is not only pretty entertaining, but it also shows just the contrast and the changes Johnny has had since MK9 when this version of Johnny was taken from, and how older Johnny teaches his younger self about how important family is, which is the lesson that he got from MKX and the main theme of that game. It's great stuff. And that does it for the rebooted timeline. There aren't a lot of characters they really nail on the head, but some of them that they do get, they really get, so I can appreciate that. Moving on to the most recent timeline, the New Era timeline started by Liu Kang with Kronika's Hourglass. This timeline only has one game, Mortal Kombat 1, so remember that this one is subject to change based on what happens in future titles. This timeline is also by far the most different compared to the other two, so this should be a major shakeup on which characters are in the top 5. Some honorable mentions: Ashrah is really cool in the game, but she doesn't appear enough. Tanya and Rain in Chaos Reigns are amazing, but I can't include them as they are technically from a different timeline. Li Mei is fairly decent, and I appreciate them fixing Sindel, and even contrasting the evil version of her to the corrected form. Starting with the top 5, I got Reptile in the number 5 spot, a character that would probably not even be top 20 in the previous two timelines, but MK1 really improves him quite a bit. They finally expanded on his backstory of his race and gave him a family, just to kill him off, poor guy. But it really fleshes him out more, and he's also a good guy now, but it doesn't feel like a forced way just to change him up for the sake of it. It feels like a natural progression that makes sense for his character. I just wish they included him a bit more in the story, but this is still by far the best version of Reptile we have ever gotten. You could even say they perfected him. Top right corner, go watch my video. At number 4, I have Mileena. Mileena was given a big spotlight in MK1, with her being the heir to the Outworld throne, but they gave her this new story of having this Tarkat disease, having to sneak around, control herself, with the threat of her not receiving the throne of Outworld as a result of this disease. I think that's definitely an interesting way to evolve the character and give her more to do throughout the story mode. Plus, we get to see more of her relationships with Kitana, Sindel, Tanya, and she even gets her own chapter eventually and meets Jared in the form of Ermac. And there's not really much more to say than that. Just a solid version of the character where she's more important than ever and eventually becomes the Outworld Queen. At number 3, I have Kenshi. Now, I mostly have Kenshi here because I really like the slight changes made to his character that make him more of a, for lack of a better term, edgy character. The connections to the Yakuza immediately seemed like an amazing idea, and then him trying to find Sento and meeting Johnny because of it, and his friendship with Johnny was great. Yes, friendship. Not anything more than that, you weirdos. Then having his own chapter, becoming blinded, and finding out how to use Sento and become the Kenshi we all know and love, it was the perfect demonstration of what MK1 should have done with every character. Changing what the characters are, but not who they are. And this change just made Kenshi all the more badass. At number 2, I honestly can't even believe I'm saying this right now. Like, if I had said this 2022, early 2023, or just any time before that, I honestly think I would have been committed to a psych ward, but I have Baraka as the second best character in the timeline. What this game did to save the perception of Baraka was truly clutch. The man was starting to receive a background NPC status with how much he was jobbing to every single character. But in MK1's story, Baraka finally gets some wins. More wins than losses, in fact, and it's truly beautiful to see. And not only that, but his story is great, now being cast out rather than the main outworld forces, being quarantined for their disease and used for experiments. I was very skeptical of Tarkat at first because making a character's entire race a disease seemed a bit odd, but they used it really well here with Baraka and the previously mentioned Melina. But Baraka having an entire chapter where he's beating people, being a badass, standing his ground, it's truly amazing and has had a great impact on his character. People think he's cool again. But for number one, this kind of feels like cheating because technically this character is carried over from a previous timeline, but I got Liu Kang. Seeing Liu Kang finally come into his own as the protector of Earthrealm, which we've gotten hints to ever since MK9, was really great. I really love seeing these characters actually evolve, and having Liu as the new Raiden figure, who still feels like the same Liu we've always known, was really fun to see. Seeing his knowledge of the previous timelines and how that's made him change things this time around, but still making those mistakes, is exactly what we'd want from this character coming off of MK11. It's just unfortunate that the story around him isn't really what we wanted to see, cause in a traditional MK storyline like the first half of the game, he is truly great to see, training the Mortal Kombat characters and stuff. I really hope for the next few games we get more grounded storylines that show better the contrast between him and Raiden when it comes to just general early Mortal Kombat narratives. But I got a feeling that's not going to happen. In fact, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get more than 2 games without the timeline being reset again. But that'll do it for the top 5 characters in every Mortal Kombat timeline. You guys let me know what your favorite characters were from each timeline. And while you're down there, make sure to check out the links in the description to my merch store, Twitter, and Instagram. Also, make sure to give this video a like to show your support, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to know when I next upload a new video. And with that being said, that's it for this video, my fellow oddities. I'll see you next time.